Gabriel Zane adjusted the brown paper bags in his arms as he climbed the steps of the penthouse building, his breath coming in short puffs from the weight of the groceries. Delivering food wasn't his dream job, but with a 6-year-old daughter depending on him, he did whatever it took to keep food on their own table. He knocked on the heavy wooden door, waiting. No answer. With a sigh, he knocked again, harder this time. The door swung open abruptly, revealing a woman in a sleek black dress and bare feet. Her long, dark hair was pulled into a loose bun, and her sharp brown eyes locked onto him with an intensity that caught him off guard. "You're late," she said, crossing her arms. Gabriel frowned. "I'm sorry, traffic was bad." The woman exhaled, rubbing her temples. "Fine, just come in." He hesitated. I'm just supposed to drop these off." "Just put them in the kitchen," she interrupted, already turning away. Gabriel stepped inside, glancing around. The place was massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than his entire apartment, and a scent of fresh lilies in the air. He set the groceries down on the marble countertop. "Did you forget the sparkling water?" she asked, flipping through the receipt. "No, it's in the bag." She eyed him, then nodded. "Good." Gabriel expected her to dismiss him, maybe toss a quick thanks over her shoulder, but instead, she lingered. "You're new," she finally said. "Not really, just picked up extra shifts," he replied, wiping his hands on his jeans. She studied him for a long moment before extending a hand. "Tessa Rhodes." He shook it, surprised by the firm grip. "Gabriel." There was something about her, something guarded, like she was used to keeping people at a distance. He knew the type: people with money, people who didn't have to scrape by. "All right, Gabriel," Tessa said, stepping back. "Thanks for the delivery." He nodded and turned to leave, but just as he reached the door, he heard her call out. "Wait." He turned. Do you have a daughter?" she asked, her gaze flicking to the small drawing sticking out of his pocket. It was a crayon sketch of a princess, one his little girl had insisted he carry. Gabriel hesitated. "Yes." Something shifted in her expression, something almost soft, but then it was gone, replaced by the same cool indifference. "Never mind," she said quickly. "Have a good night." He left, feeling like he had just stepped into a world he didn't belong in. But as he rode the elevator down, he couldn't shake the feeling that Tessa Rhodes, whoever she really was, wasn't as put together as she seemed. Gabriel wasn't expecting to see Tessa Rhodes again. People like her, wealthy, powerful, perfectly put together, didn't cross paths with people like him in any meaningful way. But life had a strange way of proving him wrong. The following evening, he was back at her building, another delivery order in his hands. This time, he wasn't surprised when she opened the door almost instantly, as if she'd been waiting. "You again," she said, her gaze flicking over him before landing on the bags. "Looks like it," he replied, stepping inside when she motioned for him. As he placed the groceries on the counter, he noticed the faint scent of something burning. His eyes drifted to the stove, where a pan sat abandoned, its contents charred beyond recognition. "You cook?" he asked, lifting an eyebrow. Tessa exhaled sharply and crossed her arms. "Not particularly well, apparently." Gabriel chuckled, shaking his head. What was it supposed to be? "Pasta, how hard could it be?" she muttered, clearly frustrated. He glanced at the untouched ingredients in the grocery bags. "You bought all the right stuff, just didn't execute." "Thanks for the insight," she shot back, though there was no real bite to her words. Gabriel hesitated for a moment before reaching into the bag and pulling out a bundle of fresh basil. "I can make something out of this, if you want." Tessa blinked, clearly caught off guard. "You cook?" "I had to learn. My daughter's picky, and takeout every night isn't cheap." She studied him for a beat longer before stepping aside. "Fine, but if you poison me, I'm suing." Gabriel rolled his eyes, already moving through her kitchen with the kind of ease that came from necessity. He found a clean pan, heated some oil, and started chopping garlic. It didn't take long before the air filled with the warm, rich scent of sautéed herbs and tomatoes. Tessa leaned against the counter, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You don't seem like a grocery delivery guy," she said eventually. He didn't look up, "and you don't seem like someone who orders her own groceries." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, but she didn't deny it. "So what do you really do?" she pressed. Gabriel stirred the pasta, debating how much to say. "Construction. I take whatever extra work it can get." "Why?" He glanced at her then, meeting her gaze. "Why do you think?" Something in her expression shifted. She didn't pry further, but he could tell she understood. A few minutes later, he plated the pasta and slid a dish toward her. She took a bite, eyebrows lifting slightly. "This is actually good." "Try not to sound so surprised," he muttered, shaking his head. Tessa ignored him and kept eating. For a moment, the two of them sat in an easy silence, the city lights stretching out beyond her windows. Then suddenly she asked, "How old is she?" Gabriel didn't have to ask who she meant. 6. Tessa nodded, twirling her fork through the pasta. "That's a fun age." He tilted his head. "You say that like you know." "My sister has kids," she said simply. "I used to spend a lot of time with them. Before." She trailed off, her expression briefly clouding before she shook it away. Gabriel didn't push, though curiosity tugged at him. Instead, he let the conversation drift to safer topics: the chaos of city traffic, the absurd price of organic produce, the fact that she had 3 different brands of bottled water in her fridge, but no real food. By the time he left, he realized something strange. Tessa Rhodes wasn't just some cold-hearted CEO locked away in her penthouse. There was more to her, and, against his better judgment, he wanted to know what. Gabriel wasn't sure why he accepted Tessa's next invitation. It wasn't exactly an invitation, really more like a casual statement as he dropped off her latest order. "You might as well stay," she had said, pulling out ingredients in a way that made it clear she expected him to cook again. He could have said no, should have, probably. But something about her, about the way she looked at him like he wasn't just another delivery guy, like she actually wanted him, there made it impossible to walk away. So he stayed. This time, she helped, or at least, she tried. He directed her to chop an onion, only to watch her struggle with the knife like she'd never held one before. "You're doing that all wrong," he said, taking it from her. She huffed. "I don't usually prepare my own meals." "Yeah, I figured." He moved beside her, his hands steady as he showed her the right way to dice. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then, softly, "I grew up with staff. Cooking wasn't something I had to learn." Gabriel glanced at her. "And now?" She shrugged. "Now, I order groceries and burn pasta." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You could just hire a chef." "I could." She looked at him then, her expression unreadable. "But I like this." The words sat between them, heavier than they should have. Gabriel swallowed and turned back to the stove. He didn't belong in her world, and he knew it. But for some reason, she kept pulling him in. After dinner, she surprised him again. "Do you want to see something?" she asked, setting down her fork. He hesitated. What kind of something? Instead of answering, she stood and led him down a hallway he hadn't noticed before. At the end was a door, plain compared to the others in the penthouse. She pushed it open and stepped inside. Gabriel followed and stopped short. The room was nothing like the rest of the place. Where everything else was sleek and modern, this space was warm, filled with shelves of books, scattered sketches pinned to the walls, and a large easel in the corner. "You paint?" he asked, taking it all in. Tessa leaned against the doorframe. "I used to." He walked closer to the easel, where a half-finished canvas sat, the strokes bold but uncertain. "Why'd you stop?" She hesitated. "I had to focus on other things." "Like what?" Her jaw tightened. "Like running a company." Gabriel turned to face her. "You don't love it, do you?" Tessa's expression flickered, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she stepped into the room, her fingers trailing over a paintbrush on the desk. "I was never supposed to run Rhodes Industries," she admitted. "That was my father's plan for my brother, but when she stopped, taking a breath before continuing. When he died, I was the only one left." Gabriel didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to seeing her like this, unguarded. "I don't regret it," she went on, though it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. "But sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I had chosen differently." He studied her. "You can still choose." She let out a soft, almost bitter laugh. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" Her gaze met his, something unreadable in her eyes. "Because when you're responsible for an empire, walking away isn't an option." Gabriel wanted to argue, but he knew he couldn't understand her world. Instead, he reached for the paintbrush she had touched earlier and handed it to her. "Then don't walk away," he said. "Just pick this back up." Tessa looked down at the brush, her fingers curling around it. For a moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, she turned to the easel. Gabriel didn't say anything as she dipped the brush into the nearest paint and pressed it to the canvas. The first stroke was tentative, but the next came with more confidence. He watched as something shifted in her, the tension she always carried easing just slightly. Neither of them spoke, but in the quiet of that room, something between them changed. And Gabriel knew, despite every logical reason to stay away, he was already in too deep. Gabriel tried to tell himself that this thing with Tessa, whatever it was, couldn't last. Their worlds were too different, their lives built on opposite foundations. But every time he made a delivery to her penthouse, she found a reason for him to stay. And every time he did. Tonight was no different. He had just set the last of her groceries on the kitchen counter when she slipped off her heels and leaned against the marble, watching him. "You know," she said, her voice teasing, "I have an entire corporate team that handles acquisitions, and yet somehow I've ended up completely dependent on you for food." Gabriel exhaled a laugh. "Maybe you should fire them." She tilted her head. "Tempting, but then I wouldn't have an excuse to see you." The words sent a warmth through him that he wasn't ready to examine. Instead, he busied himself with unpacking the bags, but she reached out, her fingers grazing his wrist. "Stay," she said softly. This was different. The other times, there had been an unspoken understanding that he would linger, that they would dance around whatever was building between them. But now, she was asking outright. Gabriel met her gaze, searching for hesitation. There was none. So he stayed. They cooked together, though it was mostly him doing the work while she stole bites of ingredients when she thought he wasn't looking. He pretended not to notice, but when she tried to sneak a piece of fresh mozzarella, he caught her wrist. "You're worse than my kid," he said, shaking his head. Tessa grinned, not pulling away. "Maybe I just like seeing if you'll stop me." The challenge in her voice made his pulse quicken. "You don't think I will?" She lifted a shoulder in a slow shrug. "I think you like letting me get away with things." Gabriel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The air between them had already shifted. He could feel it, the weight of all the moments that had led to this one. Tessa was the first to move, stepping closer, her hand still in his. "Tell me I'm wrong," she murmured. He couldn't. Instead, he closed the distance between them. his fingers brushing along her jaw before he kissed her. It wasn't careful or hesitant. It was the kind of kiss that came from weeks of unspoken words, from late nights spent pretending they weren't falling into something neither of them had planned for. When they finally pulled apart, she stayed close, her forehead resting against his. "This is insane," she whispered. Gabriel exhaled a soft laugh. "Yeah." She tilted her head, her lips barely brushing his again. "But you're not leaving, are you?" He should have. He should have walked away before this became something neither of them could undo. But he didn't. Instead, he kissed her again, and that was answer enough. The next morning, Gabriel woke to the soft golden light filtering through the penthouse windows. Tessa was sitting by the floor-to-ceiling glass, her legs tucked under her, sipping coffee as the city stretched out below her. For a moment, he just watched her. He had never imagined himself in a place like this, wrapped up in a world so different from his own. And yet, here he was, and somehow, it felt inevitable. Tessa turned, catching him watching her. She smiled, but there was something thoughtful in her expression. "You don't look like someone who regrets last night," she said. Gabriel sat up, resting his arms on his knees. "I don't." She studied him, as if waiting for him to say something else. When he didn't, she set down her coffee. "Then, why do you look like you're trying to convince yourself you belong here?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Because I don't." Tessa frowned, standing and crossing the room until she was in front of him. "Who decided that?" Gabriel looked up at her, searching her face. "Come on, Tessa, look around. You and me, this doesn't make sense." She sat beside him, her fingers brushing against his. "It does to me." He wanted to believe that. He wanted to ignore the reality that their lives weren't built to fit together. But before he could say any of it, Tessa spoke again. "Come with me tonight." Gabriel blinked. "Where?" She hesitated, as if debating whether to explain. Finally, she sighed. "It's a gala, a fundraiser for the foundation I run. Have to be there, but don't want to go alone." He let out a dry laugh. "Tessa, I don't even own a suit." "That's easily fixed." He shook his head. "I don't fit in at those kinds of places." She tilted her head. "You fit with me." It wasn't fair, the way she said things like that so simply, like they were undeniable truths. Gabriel exhaled. "You're impossible." Tessa smiled. "And you're coming with me." That night, Gabriel stood in front of the penthouse mirror, adjusting the cuff of the suit Tessa had somehow arranged for him. It fit perfectly, which didn't surprise him. She had a way of making things happen. When he stepped into the living room, she was waiting, dressed in an elegant black gown that hugged her frame, her hair swept up with just a few loose strands framing her face. Gabriel had seen her in expensive clothes before, but this was different. This wasn't the version of her she showed to the world, this was the version she showed when she wanted him to see her. And it wrecked him. Tessa stepped closer, smoothing the lapel of his jacket. "You clean up well." He huffed a laugh. "You say that like you're surprised." She grinned. "Maybe just a little." He shook his head but didn't pull away. "You ready for this?" She hesitated, her fingers still resting against his chest. "I should be asking you that." Gabriel exhaled. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready for your world." Tessa tilted her head, her gaze steady. "I don't need you to be ready for my world, Gabriel. I just need you to be ready for me." He looked at her, at the way she was watching him like he was the only thing that mattered, and he knew he was already hers. So he took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Then let's go." The gala was a world unlike anything Gabriel had ever stepped into. Chandeliers dripped with crystal, casting golden light over a sea of tuxedos and shimmering gowns. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne, and conversation hummed in the air, a symphony of power and influence. Tessa led him through the entrance with effortless grace, her fingers laced through his. There was something grounding about the way she held on to him, as if she wasn't just bringing him into her world, she was making sure he stayed beside her in it. Eyes turned as they walked past, whispers trailing in their wake. Gabriel didn't have to hear them to know what they were saying. He wasn't one of them, and they all knew it. A man in a crisp navy suit approached, his smile polished but his eyes calculating. "You made it," he said to Tessa, though his gaze flickered briefly to Gabriel. "And with a guest." Tessa's grip on Gabriel's hand tightened slightly. "Gabriel, this is Simon Hawthorne. He's on the board of the foundation." Simon extended a hand, his grip firm but assessing. "Pleasure to meet you." Gabriel met his gaze evenly. "You too." Simon lingered for a beat too long before turning back to Tessa. "I must admit, I'm surprised. You usually attend these things alone." Tessa's expression didn't waver. Maybe it was time for a change. Simon chuckled, though there was something behind it, something knowing. "I suppose we all need a change now and then. If you'll excuse me, I see someone I need to speak with." As soon as he was gone, Gabriel exhaled slowly. "He didn't like me." Tessa arched a brow. "He doesn't know you." "He didn't like that you brought me." She tilted her head, studying him. "Does that bother you?" Gabriel glanced around the room. "I just don't want to make things harder for you." Tessa's expression softened. "Gabriel, if I cared what people like Simon think, I wouldn't have built a company the way I did. I certainly wouldn't have invited you here." That should have reassured him, but something about the way people watched them, the way they measured him, made him feel like a temporary fixture in Tessa's life, something fragile enough to be shaken loose at any moment. A waiter passed, and Tessa plucked 2 glasses of champagne from the tray, handing one to Gabriel. "Drink," she said. "It helps with the staring." He huffed a quiet laugh despite himself. "You deal with this all the time." "More than I'd like." She took a sip. "But it's worth it for nights like this." Gabriel turned to her. "Why is tonight different?" Her gaze met his, something steady and certain in it. "Because you're here." His chest tightened, and for a moment, the noise, the whispers, the weight of feeling out of place, it all faded. Then a voice interrupted. "Tessa." They turned to see a woman approaching, older, poised, with the same sharp features as Tessa. "Mother," Tessa said, her tone even but unreadable. Gabriel straightened slightly, understanding immediately who this was. Her mother's gaze flicked to him. "And who is this?" Tessa didn't hesitate. "Gabriel Zane." Her mother's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to place the name. When she couldn't, she simply nodded. "Interesting." Gabriel extended a hand. "Nice to meet you." She took it briefly, her grip cool and brief. "Likewise." There was a charged pause before she turned back to Tessa. "I wasn't aware you were bringing a date." Tessa held her gaze. "I didn't think I needed to clear my personal life with anyone." Her mother's lips pressed together in a thin line. "It's not about permission, Tessa. It's about appearances." Gabriel felt the weight of the words, the quiet implication behind them. He wasn't the right appearance. Before Tessa could respond, her mother's gaze flicked back to him. "Mr. Zane, what is it that you do?" The question was casual, but the intent behind it wasn't. Gabriel met her eyes. "I work construction, and I deliver groceries on the side." A flicker of something passed over her face, surprise, perhaps, or something colder. Tessa's grip on his arm tightened slightly, but Gabriel didn't look away. Her mother gave a small, practiced smile. "How industrious." The words were polite, but the meaning was clear. Tessa stepped in before Gabriel could respond. "Gabriel's work ethic is one of the things I admire most about him." Her mother's expression didn't change, but there was something in her eyes, something assessing. After a beat, she inclined her head. "I hope you enjoy the evening." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Gabriel exhaled slowly. That was something. Tessa rolled her eyes. That was her being restrained. Gabriel glanced at her. "I don't fit into this world, Tessa, and your mother knows it." Tessa turned fully to him, her expression unreadable. "Do you think that matters to me?" He hesitated. "I think it might matter to everyone else." She studied him for a long moment before sighing. "Come with me." Gabriel followed as she led him through the crowd, out onto a balcony overlooking the city. The air was cooler here, quieter. Tessa leaned against the railing. "I know what people think, I know what they expect, and I don't care." Gabriel watched her. "Maybe you should." Her gaze snapped to his. "Why?" "Because I don't want to be the thing that complicates your life," he said. "I don't want to be the reason people look at you differently." Tessa shook her head, stepping closer. "You think I care about their approval." "I think you've spent your whole life proving yourself to them," Gabriel said, "and I don't want to be the thing they use against you." She exhaled sharply. "Gabriel, the only thing that matters to me is what I want, and I want you." His breath caught. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "I don't care what my mother thinks, or Simon, or anyone else in that room. They don't get to decide who I love." The words hit him like a hammer, knocking the air from his lungs. "Tessa." She shook her head. "No more excuses. No more worrying about what other people think. Just tell me what you want." Gabriel looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, at the way she was standing there, willing to fight for this for him. And he knew his answer. So he pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "You," he whispered, "I want you." Tessa smiled, and for the first time all night, Gabriel didn't feel out of place. He felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Tessa had never cared about the whispers before. She had learned to navigate the world of power and expectation with a practiced indifference, letting the judgments of others roll off her like rain against glass. But tonight, standing on the balcony with Gabriel's hand in hers, she realized something she had never truly had something to fight for. Now she did. As they stepped back into the ballroom, the weight of 100 curious stares pressed in around them. Conversations hushed, replaced by the quiet hum of speculation. Gabriel's jaw tightened, his grip on her hand subtly shifting, as if bracing himself for whatever storm was coming. Tessa lifted her chin, keeping her fingers firmly wrapped around his. If they wanted a reason to talk, she would give them one. A man in a deep gray suit intercepted them near the champagne fountain, his expression unreadable. He was older, with the kind of presence that came from years of commanding rooms just like this. "Your father would have found this interesting," he said, his gaze flicking toward Gabriel before returning to Tessa. She met his eyes without hesitation. "My father's not here." The man's lips pressed together, though there was no real malice in his expression, just the quiet weight of expectation. "No, but the company still is, and you, Tessa, are its face." Gabriel exhaled quietly beside her, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. She squared her shoulders. "If I'm the face, then I decide what that means." The man studied her for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "That's what I always liked about you. You don't blink." "I don't see the point," Tessa replied. With that, the man stepped away, blending back into the sea of power brokers and investors. Gabriel exhaled as soon as he was gone. "Is this what every event is like for you?" "More or less." He shook his head. "It's exhausting." She turned to face him fully. "Then why did you come?" His gaze softened, his fingers brushing against hers. "Because you asked me to." The honesty in his voice sent something warm curling through her. Before she could respond, the music shifted, a slow melody drifting through the air. Couples moved toward the dance floor, the space transforming into something softer, more intimate. Gabriel glanced at the dancing pairs, then back at her. "Do you actually do this kind of thing?" She arched a brow. "Dance?" He nodded. A smile tugged at her lips. "I can manage." He exhaled through his nose in amusement. "Show me." Without hesitation, she led him toward the dance floor. The second they stepped into the warm glow of the chandeliers, the room seemed to shrink, the crowd fading into the background. She placed one hand on his shoulder, the other in his, and he followed her lead, his movements hesitant but steady. After a few beats, he spoke quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You're leading." She suppressed a laugh. "Would you rather I let you stumble?" He exhaled, shaking his head. "I don't stumble." "Then prove it." Something shifted in his expression. His grip on her waist tightened just slightly, and then, without warning, he turned them, guiding her in a slow, deliberate step that sent a ripple of surprise through her. She tilted her head. "You're better at this than you let on." He shrugged. "I had to pick up a few things over the years." Tessa studied him, curious. "Like what?" His gaze flickered with something almost teasing. "How to keep up with a woman who thinks she's always in control." A quiet laugh escaped her. "And how's that going for you?" Gabriel's fingers traced a slow path across her back as he pulled her closer. "I think I'm doing all right." She didn't argue. As the song came to an end, he didn't let her go right away. Instead, he lingered, his forehead brushing against hers. "I want more than just stolen moments, Tessa," he murmured. "I don't want to be something temporary in your world." Her chest tightened. "You're not." His eyes searched hers. "Then say it." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I love you, Gabriel." The words felt like an unraveling, a release of everything she had been holding back. Gabriel didn't hesitate. He kissed her right there, in front of everyone, in front of the whispers and the expectations, and the weight of all the things that should have kept them apart. And in that moment, none of it mattered. 6 months later, Tessa stood in the middle of a sunlit rooftop garden, the city stretching out around them like an endless horizon. The space was quiet, intimate, the kind of place where big decisions were made. Gabriel stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, watching her. She turned to face him. "You're sure about this?" He stepped closer. "I've never been more sure about anything." She exhaled, her heart pounding. "Then do it." Gabriel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Tessa's breath hitched as he opened it, revealing a ring simple, elegant, exactly right. He took her hand. "Marry me." She swallowed hard, emotions swelling in her throat. "Yes." The second the word left her lips, he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. Holding onto her like she was the only thing that mattered. And as the city hummed around them, she realized something she had spent her whole life building an empire. But Gabriel was the only thing that had ever truly felt like home.